Okay, so this is some revision tips for the higher writing paper for AQA Spanish GCSE, as the exam is coming up soon. So if you do want any topic vocabulary or anything like that, just best go to Quizlet or the AQA website for vocabulary. This won't go through reams of vocabulary, it'll just go through sort of the most important things, tips, techniques, and strategies to get through the exam and get good marks. So 90 words, we will have a choice of 2 questions. Each paper does. You pick the one that you feel like you can say more about without repeating yourself, please. You do not need to have an equal coverage of the bullet points. You can write 10 words for one bullet point and 50 odd words for the other. It doesn't matter as long as each one is mentioned and answered correctly. Do remember that means that if it's a bullet point that's asking for a past tense and you don't answer with a past tense, it might be that they cannot then award you the marks for that bullet point because you haven't covered the right tense with it. One of the bullet points will require a past tense, as you've probably gathered by now. One will require a future tense. One will ask for an opinion. And the other one's a little bit random. It might ask about what you normally do in a certain situation, your preference, or your ideas about something. The past tense bullet points, you recognize them by ¿qué hiciste?, ¿cómo pasaste?, ¿cómo celebraste? Anything ending in este or iste will usually determine that it's a past tense question. So in order to answer them, my advice to you would be to pick a time, phrase, or location from the question prompt. Say you went somewhere, give 2 activities that you did and 1 that you didn't do. The examples are all going to use these 3 verbs, by the way. Vi, I saw, comí, I ate, and hablé, I spoke. And finally, you'll want to say how it was using the word fue with an adjective. So as an example, notice on the right-hand side, I have got the criteria that I'm going to use. The prompt is ¿qué hiciste con tu familia durante un día divertido en el pasado? Here I start off time phrase un día divertido en el pasado. I've lifted that directly from the question and I've said fui a, saying where I went. That starts off with a past tense, tick in the box already. Fui a la playa con mi familia donde vi muchas personas y hablé con mi hermana. Fue muy divertido. Fue there, it was very fun. I've used the exclamation marks with the upside down one to show that I know what I'm doing. Sin embargo, no comí un helado. Now remember, that's where I've said 2 activities I did and 1 that I didn't. It just helps to give contrast, so I can use sin embargo as a phrase. Another example, ¿qué hiciste recientemente para ganar dinero? You'll notice I've used the same 3 verbs that I said I would. Ideally here you would say trabajé en or trabajé de, to say I worked as. Trabajé como is another alternative. But here I've just gone with recientemente, lifting that out of the question. Fui a la biblioteca para ganar dinero. Hablé con clientes y vi muchos libros. I know it's not that strong saying vi muchos. I saw a lot of books, of course you did in the library. Pero no comí ya que no está permitido. Fue bastante aburrido. Once again, using that word fue there, it was, making sure I've said 2 things I did and 1 I didn't so that I can include some contrast. Next prompt for more past tense. ¿Qué hiciste durante las vacaciones del año pasado? I've started off time phrase, lifted from the question once again. Fui a España, said where I went. Vi muchos monumentos y comí en un restaurante. Said 2 things that I've done, and then pero no hablé español. But I didn't speak Spanish. Again, 1 thing that I didn't, so that I can show contrast with pero and sin embargo. Para mí fue increíble. It was incredible. Again, using that word fue to give my opinion. Last prompt for the past tense. ¿Qué hiciste la última vez que visitaste un sitio interesante en tu región? I've started off with el año pasado. I avoided saying la última vez que visité un sitio interesante en mi región. I just try to avoid that, so I'm not lifting too much from the question that may not get me marks because they say, oh, well, you just copied it. So I've just changed it to el año pasado. Fui a Londres, said where I went. Fue muy emocionante, I've said how it was. No vi muchos artefactos en el museo, pero comí en un restaurante italiano y hablé con mis amigos. 2 things I did, 1 I didn't. So again, I could say, show the contrast, pero or sin embargo. The future tense, recognize them with ¿qué vas a hacer?, ¿qué quieres hacer?, ¿qué te gustaría hacer?, or ¿qué planes tienes? If it says ¿qué planes tienes?, please do not say mis planes son. It's difficult to make it sound good if you start off with that. In terms of answering them, you will need to pick a time phrase or location from the question prompt. Start your future tense with voy a, quiero, o me gustaría, or a mixture of all three so that you have variety. That gets you marks in your range of language, and use an infinitive after each of those three. As you're on higher, you can also use the future tense to say like, hablaré, iré, but you can just stick with the bog standard future tenses with an infinitive to get your full marks in the 90 word. 150 word will be a little bit different. Then use será to say it will be, or sería, it would be, or va a ser, it's going to be. Sería probably more useful here. You'll see in the examples. So the first one, si te gustaría visitar un festival en España en el futuro. Here I've said en el futuro me gustaría visitar un festival en España porque sería muy divertido. Quiero ir a la tomatina y voy a viajar con mi familia. You'll notice I've used me gustaría, quiero and voy a, all in the same one to add variety. I've also said sería, just so that I can give an opinion on how it would be. The next prompt, si te gustaría ser profesor o profesora en el futuro. Again, I've started off with en el futuro, lifted it right out of the question. No me gustaría ser profesor porque sería bastante difícil y voy a ser abogado ya que quiero ganar mucho dinero. You'll notice here I've used ya que instead of porque. I do like to add that in for variety, so make sure you do as well. The other alternatives would be puesto que and dado que. Once again, in this question, I've got me gustaría, I've got voy a, and I've got quiero for the variety. And the last prompt example here, el año próximo voy a estudiar en un instituto en Italia porque me gustaría hablar italiano y sería muy interesante vivir en otro país. Here I've just used voy a and me gustaría. I didn't put quiero in. I didn't want to shoehorn it in where I didn't think it'd fit, but you could do if you wanted to. Once again, all of these are 20 odd words. They would answer the bullet point in its entirety and you'd be on for full marks if you can answer the other 3 bullet points in a good way. Opinion bullet points. First of all, recognizing them with the word opinión, or qué opinas, or qué piensas, te gusta. All of these are going to prompt you to give an opinion on something. So to answer them, please never start with mi opinión es. I like to say that just before we start. Give a positive opinion with a reason, give a negative with a reason, vary your adjectives, and use más or menos que, and muy, bastante, un poco, just so that it seems to flow better and sounds a bit more natural. So the prompt, tu opinión sobre tus estudios, you start off not like that. You never start off mi opinión es. Very difficult to make it sound good after that. Me gusta mucho estudiar español porque es muy útil para las vacaciones. Here I've said para, adds a bit more detail to what it's useful for. It's good for something, it's useful for something, or it's fun for certain people. You can also put on. Sin embargo, no me gusta nada el teatro ya que es menos interesante. So once again, I've used ya que for variety, different opinion phrase, and because I'm using a positive then a negative opinion, I can use contrast. Tus opiniones sobre las tecnologías en general. I've started off with en general, lifted it from the question. Me encanta la tecnología ya que se puede escuchar música y comprar en línea. 2 activities you can do. Sin embargo, no me gusta mi ordenador porque puede ser muy despacio. Don't like it because it can be slow. So here, once again, I'm just using a bit of variety there with the opinion phrases, saying a couple of activities that you can do. So again, it just gets up my range of language. Other bullet points, they could be anything. It is a bit random. ¿Qué haces? ¿Qué prefieres? Tus ideas sobre. So to answer them, please never start off with mis ideas es or mis ideas son. If it asks you for what your ideas are on a certain topic, never start with me prefiero. It is just prefiero. Instead, start with a frequency. It can be a good idea here. Normalmente, a menudo, a veces, and that can also give us contrast. If we say normally we do something, whereas at other times we do something else. Follow it with an opinion on the activity and use más and menos. So the prompt here, si prefieres pasar tu tiempo libre con tu familia o con tus amigos. I've started off time phrase. Normalmente prefiero pasar tiempo con mis amigos porque es más interesante. After that, contrast, sin embargo, a veces. Again, using a frequency time phrase that's different so that I can have a bit of contrast. Me gusta ver la tele con mi familia porque me encantan las comedias. Again, use 2 different opinion phrases there. Give an opinion, give a reason, you get more marks that way. Prompt, ¿por qué te gusta tu película favorita? I've started off normalmente, once again. Me gusta ver mi película favorita, put in brackets, Shrek, could have put commas, con mi hermano porque es más gracioso, more funnier, using the word más just to add a bit more to the answer, que las otras películas en mi casa. And we move swiftly on to the 150 word, which is our most important thing, I'd say. It's where it's worth 32 marks out of 60. So this is more than half your paper, only by a smidge, but it's more than half your paper. So you'll have a choice of 2 questions. Pick the one you feel like you can expand on without repeating yourself. This is most important because some people do end up repeating themselves, repeating similar ideas, or just giving the same idea but in the negative, and we do need to have good variety here to hit the top marks. You do not need to have an equal coverage of both of the bullet points. If you can write 100 words on one, 50 on the other, please do. You do not need to cover them equally, 75-75. The bullet points will only seem to prompt 2 tenses, but you do need more. I would advise 6 different tenses, but that can be present tense, the 2 different past tenses, the preterite and the imperfect, conditional, the future tense saying boy a, and also saying the future tense just with the E, with the accent on the end. So it can build up quite quickly. One bullet point usually asks for advantages and disadvantages. It doesn't always, but usually every year there's one that asks for advantages and disadvantages. One bullet point may be a narrative question asking about a day that you had in the past, and one bullet point may ask about future plans. There are other types of bullet points, but there's no general defining feature of them. So I'm trying to do a bit of a catch-all for the most frequent ones to give you an idea of how to answer. So 150 word, before we begin, the main idea here is how to plan your answer. So avoid waffle. If you waffle, you didn't plan, and it will be more difficult to get good marks for the content of what you've written if you aren't expressing different ideas. There are 2 bullet points, so you should outline what you're going to talk about. Think of an idea that you can relate to each of the bullet points so that you can talk a little bit more about the topic without resorting to repetitiveness. I would advise splitting the bullet points. It avoids the waffle. So just as an example, we can see the prompt, algo que hiciste recientemente que fue muy divertido, something you did recently that was very fun. Here, writing 75 words on that, maybe a bit of a stretch if you don't plan. If you can plan it, brilliant. Just write it all on that. However, you might want to say what you did that was fun, but then also talk about what you're planning to do next weekend that may not be as fun. So it's still relevant point, but then you're also being able to bring in another tense. You can add variety to your answer by talking about a different kind of activity. You can talk about why you prefer to do that fun thing than a different thing. So that's giving you your sort of opinions on things. A different prompt, a memorable day that you had in school. You could say, after talking about what the memorable day was like at school, you could say something about your future study. So you had a fun day at school on a trip to a museum. So in the future, you want to study history, just as an example there. You could also talk about a friend you met that day and what you're going to do with them. One day in school, we had a special day. I met a new person, and next weekend we're going to go to the cinema together. I don't know, something like that. And you could also go on to say why school is important after you've had such a memorable day. Maybe it does show the importance of school for you. And so you can use that to support your planning for these questions. When you look at the advantages and disadvantages questions, I'm going to give you just a bit of an outline of how you can recognize them. So ventajas y desventajas, the words for advantages and disadvantages. Lo bueno y lo malo. Lo bueno, the good thing, lo malo, the bad thing. You may also hear lo mejor, lo peor for the best thing and the worst thing. This will still apply. Si crees que es importante hacer, if you think it's important to do something, again, that's advantages, disadvantages. Is it important to go to university? The advantages of university are this. The disadvantages are this other thing. If you would like to do something in the future, again, would you like to get married in the future? Well, the advantages of getting married are, however, the disadvantages are. Also, your opinions on, so what your opinions on are on marriage, for example, for and against marriage, advantages, disadvantages would fit under that category as well. Also, if anything else, for the positives and negatives of something. So, in terms of answering them, everyone should be aware of por un lado, por otro lado, so on one hand, on the other hand. Please use those. Estoy de acuerdo, you can say you agree about something. Según, you can say according to other people, this is what the case is, or this is what they think, whereas I think something different. These are sort of ways to conclude. You'd say entonces for then, por eso for therefore, por lo tanto for so. These can help to bring you to a conclusion, as can como consecuencia, as can hasta cierto punto, to say you agree to a certain extent. He llegado a la conclusión de que, that should be, I apologize, I haven't corrected that typo, should be de que, I've arrived at the conclusion that. So we'll see in my examples here how I've used these different phrases to a half-decent effect. En fin, in short, or all in all, just to round things off, quite a short phrase to use. So when we look here, our prompt, lo bueno y lo malo de pasar las vacaciones en Inglaterra. We've got por un lado, starting off on the one hand. Now you notice I have split these two bullet points quite nicely with the advantages, disadvantages. They naturally split into advantages, disadvantages, so you don't have to think about how to split them. So I've got, starting off, por un lado, pienso que lo bueno de pasar las vacaciones en Inglaterra es que se puede visitar un montón de artefactos antiguos de diferentes culturas en los museos que tenemos en el país. So I've got that por un lado, I've got my opinion. I've said lo bueno, which they also like to see. The good thing is that. So going on from there, the stronger part of this would be when I start off saying sin embargo por otro lado. However, on the other hand, I've said the weather here is horrible, and then I've said según mis amigos españoles es lo peor de visitarme. So according to my Spanish friends, it's the worst thing about visiting me. So again, según just gives a bit more structure to the essay and gives a bit more interest to what you're writing about. Y tengo que, I have to, estar de acuerdo, I have to agree with them. Then, en fin, in short, he llegado a la conclusión de que, no, sorry, I've corrected it there, but not on the original slide. So, la conclusión de que es mejor no veranear en Inglaterra, ya que hace demasiado frío. So I said, in short, I've arrived at the conclusion that it's better not to spend the summer in England. This is 81 words, so it's more than the 75 you'd need. I could then go on to split the bullet point further, but to be honest, I'm quite happy with what we've got there so far. So using those phrases that I've got to join the answer together and to really cement my ideas has worked here. We've got another example. Si crees que es importante ir a la universidad. Again, I've started off with por un lado. So por un lado estoy completamente de acuerdo que ir a la universidad es muy importante para la mayoría de la gente. I should have said completamente de acuerdo de que ir a la universidad. My apologies there. I can correct that in future videos. Según los periódicos, according to the newspapers, that I thought would be quite cheeky. You can say, according to the newspapers, es muy difícil encontrar un trabajo hoy y como consecuencia, so it's difficult to find a job now. And as a consequence, las personas que tienen más educación tendrán más oportunidades. I've used tendrán then they will have, to add in another tense, again, gets my range of language up so that I'm looking to get more than just a few marks of those 12 that you get for the paper. Then I go to sin embargo for the contrast. Después de hablar con algunas personas, after speaking to some people, he llegado a la conclusión de que, same phrase there again, it's quite good to use, la universidad no es para todos, it's not for everyone. Por eso, therefore, depende del trabajo que quieren hacer en el futuro. It depends on the work they want to do in the future. So once again, I've used some of these phrases just to draw my answer together so that it flows that little bit better, which is what we need when we're answering the 150 words. The narrative question, to recognize them, any past tense prompts, that que hiciste o describe un día que tuviste o problemas que tuviste, anything that's just a past tense prompt may well be a narrative question, and they have appeared in quite a few exam papers. To answer them, a nice starter phrase can be me acuerdo de cuando, I remember when, and go on with the past tense from that. I remember when I went to wherever. And sequences are going to be important here. Primero, segundo, después, and antes. Entonces, en ese momento. Those sequences you can use to good effect just to draw, again, just to bring your answer together. Descubrí que, I found out that. If you need to sort of make a bit of a surprising moment in your writing, you can use that to talk about a day that you had problems. You can say, I found out that something was the case. Me gustó, I liked, again, just to give an opinion on the activities you were doing on whatever day that you're narrating. So, as an example, un día divertido que pasaste con tus amigos recientemente. I start off with my lovely phrase, me acuerdo de cuando mis amigos y yo fuimos al parque acuático. So I said, I remember when my friends and I went to the water park 2 weeks ago. Primero decidimos ir en autobús. We decided to go in by the bus. I've used primero. Again, it's a sequencer. Después, to sequence it, cuando llegamos al parque, compramos las entradas. Entonces, so I said we bought the tickets and then we started to swim. Entonces, using then can also be used to mean therefore in some circumstances, but here it's used as a sequencer. Estaba allí con 4 amigos que podían nadar mejor que yo. So there's not much there that's a sort of sequencing, but just to add a bit more flow to it, I was there with 4 friends that could swim better than me. Cuando era tarde, when it was later, or when it was the afternoon or the evening, fue en ese momento. It was in that moment cuando descubrí, when I discovered que no tenía toalla. I didn't have a towel. ¡Qué desastre! Aparte de eso, me gustó mucho el día. So apart from that, I liked the day a lot. Again, just using a few of these past tenses, sequences, handy phrases that you could use in these narrative questions. We move on to future plans. There have been future plan questions. Usually you'll see it from the word futuro or the word planes. All of those kind of things. We'll get that. Or cuando seas mayor, for example, might also come up. To answer them, use the future tenses, but do vary them. Me gustaría, quiero, quisiera, voy a, and also the past tense that just has the E with the accent on the end of an infinitive, like viviré, hablaré, estudiaré. Seguir and ando yendo, to continue doing something. So seguir hablando, seguir viviendo, seguir bebiendo, seguir estudiando, I think I've just said. And continuar can be used in the same way, to continue doing something. Si pudiera, si fuera, si tuviera, if I could, if I were, if I had. These can be used in these kinds of answers as well. And also, cuando tenga dinero, una casa o amigos, when I have money, when I have a house, when I have friends, then you can continue on there with the future tense. Conditional tenses, you'll also want to use verbs ending in ría, like sería, hablaría, comería, iría, to say what you would do. So, the prompt, ¿qué vas a hacer para estar contento en tu vida en el futuro? I could start off with, if I were honest, si fuera honesto, tendría que decir que no sé lo que quiero hacer para estar contento en mi vida en el futuro. So if I were honest, I'd have to say that I don't know what I want to do to be happy in my life in the future. I've mixed up a few of the tenses there just so that we can see how it can be done. Then, cuando tenga 18 años, when I'm 18, pienso que me gustaría continuar estudiando en la universidad. I think that I would like to continue studying. That continuar estudiando is a really strong phrase to use in the exam. So if you do get a chance to use it in the 150 word, please do. Ya que sería buena formación. Formación there just means education or training. So it'd be good training. Y podría sacar buenas notas para mi trabajo. También creo que voy a comprar una casa que tiene muchas habitaciones. ¿Por qué? And here, viviría mejor. I would live better si tuviera más espacio. If I had more space. So I've used that si tuviera, if I had, with the conditional viviría. I would live better if I had more space. Lo que para mí sería más importante es tener una familia algún día. What would that, literally, lo que that for me would be more important is having a family one day. So here I've mixed up the tenses quite a bit and I've got 81 words without really having to split the bullet point too much. Again, there's a lot you can talk about for being happy in your life in the future. Here we've just got some super reusable phrases that we can look through. So starting off with si tuviera, si fuera, si hubiera, si pudiera. Any of these followed by the conditional will be good. So if I had a big house, I would be happy. Si tuviera una casa grande, estaría o sería contento. If I were, si fuera rico, me gustaría comprar. If I were rich, I would like to buy. Si hubiera, if there were. So si hubiera más parques en mi pueblo, if there were more parks in my town, what would you do? Would you be happy? Would you be sad? Would you play more football? Up to you. And si pudiera, if I could. Si pudiera vivir en España, me gustaría you get the idea. Second box there, si hubiera sabido que, habría dicho que. If I'd known that something, I would have said that. And si no fuera por, if it weren't for. These two phrases can just add a bit more variety into what you're saying, and they're higher level phrases. They're the kind of things that you'll learn how to form in A level, but here just learn them as a set phrase to use in your exams to show off what you can do. Bottom box, I do like these. The word haya, please just use it in these 4 circumstances that you can see here. Me gusta que haya, I like that there is, so me gusta que haya una piscina en mi pueblo. Quiero que haya, I want there to be. Quiero que haya más personas en mi ciudad. I want there to be more people in my town. Necesito que haya, I need there to be. Again, used in a similar way to say what you need there to be. And odio que haya, I hate that there is. Similar thing. So all of these, me gusta que haya, quiero que haya, necesito que haya, odio que haya. All of these will help to say what you like or dislike that there is or what you need there to be. So I would note those down and try to put one into the exam. Just as a set phrase for this time. As I said, these are the kind of phrases that in A level you do learn to pick apart. Here, we just need to know them as a set phrase to get through the exam. The translation, generally there are too many variables to know for sure what's going to come up, but marriage has tended to come up a lot. So casarse, to get married, casarme, to get married when referring to yourself, and se casaron, for they got married. The they form of the past tense does also come up a fair bit. So add-on and ieron to say they did something. So they went, fueron, they bought, compraron, they saw, vieron. These kinds of things may come up again. The seasons have come up a few times as well in past years, so make sure you're aware of primavera, verano, otoño, invierno. Learning one word to make sure that you get a mark would be a superb idea. The street has come up fairly often too, so la calle, make sure you're aware of that one. And position of things. Things have tended to be close to, far from, or next to. So again, just to make sure that you've revised those quickly before you go into the exam on Monday. That's pretty much it. So I hope that's been useful. Again, if you made it to the end, well done. Good luck and adios.